Hello everyone, I'm sorry for the misunderstanding of yesterday. Baruch Hashem, I'm away for good reasons, and therefore tomorrow I also won't be available. So I'll give over now the shir for yesterday's Amud. Sadik Beis Amud Aleph. It was a continuation of the machloikis between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yochanan and Chizkiah, when the Mishnah says that if I removed a box full of objects from Rishus HaYochid to Rishus HaRabim, and part of the box is still in the original Rishus, then you're not chayiv. The question is it that the object itself is still in the original Rishus, like a long cucumber? Or even if you have a bunch of small objects, since they're in the same box, that makes them one entity, and therefore if they're still in the first Rishus, you're not chayiv. That's the machlokes. So the Gemara now is going to say that the same machlokes happened much later in Bavel between Abaye and Rava. So we're holding the third line on Tzadik Beis Amud Aleph. V'chein Omar Rava. Rava said, similar to what Chizkiah said. Lo yishanu, we have only learned in the Mishnah, ela bekupa maleya kishruim v'diluim. Only if you have a box full with long vegetables. Then, since the same vegetable is partially in the original Rishus, it's not considered that you removed it. Avo maleya chardol, if it's full of small objects, like sesame, mustard seeds, chayiv, then he's chayiv, because those objects are already out of the rishus. Who cares that they're in the same box? Almas we see kasavar, he holds eged kli loishmi eged. The fact that it's in a one vessel, one utensil, one keli, doesn't make it one object. Abaye argues and he says, even if it's full of mustard seeds, it's potter because the box makes it one entity. Almas we see kasavar, he holds eged kli shmei eged, and that the fact that things are in the same vessel, that makes it one object. Fine. Now, to make it even more interesting, they had an argument about it. Rava explained this point, Abaye explained this point, and Abaye said, hey Rava, you're right. And Rava said, hey Abaye, you're right. So they switched opinions, and Rava held that even small objects are considered one entity, and Abaye held no, it has to be one long object. Come, Rava b'shitasi the Abaye. Come Abaye b'shitasi the Rava. Abaye accepted Rava's opinion. They come Rava b'shitasi the Abaye. Rava accepted the Abaye opinions, and now it switched around. Now Rava holds that a bunch of small objects are considered in one keli. They're considered one object, and you only chayiv if you remove the entire keli. And Abaye holds that no, as long as you remove the complete object, you're chayiv. Then they had an argument recorded from a later date after they changed their mind. And it seemed like they changed their mind again, and that does not happen to Chacham. They don't just change their mind back and forth and back and forth. They thought an opinion, fine. They heard another svara, fine. They don't just change back. So v'rami derava derava, v'rami d'abaya d'abaya, v'rami derava derava. There was a contradiction between the latest statement of Abaye and the latest statement of Rava. It seems like they switched again. It goes like this. The Itmar, we have learned a statement of Amiroim. Hamoitzi peiris l'shus rabim. One who removes fruits to l'shus rabim, and something still links them to l'shus hayochid. So there's two examples. Abaye says, Beyat, if you stretched out your hand and your body is still in the original rishus, then chayiv, we don't attach your hand to your body. We say the hand's outside, the object's outside, you put it outside, it's there, you're chayiv. However, bekeli, if there's an attachment that part of the keli is still in the original domain, but most of it is in the second domain, then we say potter. V'rav the other way around. B'yad, if your hand is stretched out but you're still in the original domain, you're potter. However, bekeli, if the object is fully outside, just the keli is partially inside, I'm chayiv. So it's a contradiction. Says the Gemara, Eipoch, you're right. When they changed their mind, that was the final thing. And if you find any recording afterwards, which seems like they're going back to the original opinion, you must switch it and say, no, it wasn't recorded right. Abai is the one who says that the keli is still attached, but the hand is not attached. 1 second. One second. 1 second. So Abaye said that if the hand is stretched out and the body is still inside, he's potter. However, if the keli is still inside, it doesn't matter, he's still chayiv. Because in the second opinion he held that a keli is not one entity. As long as the full object was removed, you're chayiv. And Rav is the one who said no. If your hand is stretched out and your body is still inside, you're chayiv. However, if the keli was put outside, even with a small object, but part of the keli was still inside, then you are a potter because the keli is one entity. Fine. So we have no contradiction. We know Rav's opinion is a keli does make it one entity, and Abai says it doesn't. We're fine with that. But the problem now is Rav's, according to the way we edited it, Rav's statement that your hand is not considered attached to you. If you removed your hand with an object to the other domain, you're chayiv. That seems to contradict a very basic Mishnah, the first Mishnah in our Masechta, which clearly says if one stretched out his hand with an object, he's pottered. That was like the whole Mishnah is based on that. That if you stretch your hand out, it's nothing. You didn't remove it. The one who removed it from your hand partially removed it, and you're both potter. There's no such a thing that your hand is separate from you. How could he say such a thing? Biyad chayiv. If it's you stretch out your hand, you're chayiv. Vatanan, we learned in the first Mishnah. Pashat balabais says yod. If the balabas stretched out his hand lechutz outside his house, not aloni mitoicha, and the poor man took from it. The poor man put into his hand and he brought it back in. Shneim pturim, because his hand is partially outside, partially inside, and he's potter, and whoever put it there is potter. So how could you tell me that I'm chayiv for removing my hand? Says the Gemara, if one removed his hand and it's higher than the ground, more than 3 tefachim higher than the ground, then the hand is an entity on its own from the ground, from the Rishus Harabim. And that hand as an entity on its own is connected to the body. That hand as an entity on its own, okay, it's attached to the body, and therefore you didn't remove it. But if you put it close to 3 tefachim to the ground, it's attached to the ground. You put it down somewhere. Since you put it down somewhere, it says Rav, you're chayiv. Abai says no. Although you put it down somewhere, but it still has a link. It's still connected to your body, and therefore you're potter. So the machlokes is, the idea is like this. I'm sorry. Let me just verify again. A hand is a small place. A hand is a small place, and therefore the hand alone is not considered that it's rested upon it. Unless the person is with his hand outside and he's standing, so it's not rested on the hand, it's rested on the person. The person is holding it, it's resting on the person, and therefore it's considered a resting place. The hand alone is not a resting place. Not because the body pulls it back. Only the hand is outside. The hand is small. The hand is not a resting place. And therefore, if you put something in a hand which is lifted way up in the ear, you're potter, because it's not resting on anything. It's not resting on a place which is 4 by 4 tefachim. It's not resting on a settled place. However, if the hand is close to the ground, it's resting on the ground. The only thing is, the hand could bring it back in because it's attached to the body. So Abaye says that makes you potter. Rabbi says no. It's resting on the ground, so you're chayiv. So basically, we had the same machlokes we had before between Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan. According to the final version, we had it between Abaye and Rava. Abaye held like Chizkiah, they look at the object, the keli doesn't make it one entity. And Rava held like Rabbi Yochanan, that you look at the keli makes it one entity. If part of the keli was inside the Rishus HaYachid, although the entire object was in Rishus Harabim, you didn't remove it. Now, if someone stretches out his hand to the other rishus, if the hand is lifted in the ear, everyone agrees that things that are resting in that hand are not considered rested in that rishus because the hand alone is not a resting place. The hand alone is small. The hand alone is not a settled thing. You didn't put it in a settled place. The machlokes is if the hand is close to the ground, within 3 tefachim. If the hand is close within 3 tefachim to the ground, then it's considered attached to the ground, and the ground is a resting place. So it's resting. The only thing is that it's attached to the body, so it's like as a link backwards. Says Rabbi, no, we don't consider that as a link. You're chayiv. Abai says, no, it is a link. It's connected to your body, and therefore you're potter. Just Mashayim by a keli, they switch around. The Rabbi says that the keli is one entity, and Abai says, no, the keli doesn't make it one entity. Fine. What's the logic? Why is a keli considered more of an attachment, and why, according to Rav, and why is hand considered more an attachment according to Abaya? It's discussed, I imagine. I don't have clear further explanation right now, so you can obviously offer it. Fine. Now we spoke about this keli. Now we're speaking about other details within removing hitzah. So here we're talking about you must carry the object in the normal manner. Now you must. You're only chayiv if you carry it in the normal manner. If you carry it in the non-normal manner, then you're potter. Obviously, you're not allowed to be d'Rabbanan, but you're potter. So he brings examples. What's called a normal manner? Hamoitzi ben bimine ben bismoile. Unlike other malachas that doing with the left hand is unusual, carrying clothes, it's usual to carry with both hands, so any hand is normal. B'seicheikai, under your arm, oyal kseifav, on your shoulders. So we'll see soon, like this. So the right hand, the left hand, and under your arm is pashat normal. The shoulders is not normal. But chayiv shekin masa b'nei kahos. In the Mishkan, the main carrying that they would continue walking with it while they're carrying it was the Kahas family, which carried the Orin and the Shulchan and the Mizbeach, the holy things which had the poles to hold it with. So they would hold those poles on their shoulders. So carrying on your shoulders is considered carrying. We must say that because that's the way it was in the Mishkan. However, Kala'acha Yod, if you held it on the back of your hand, or Beraglo, you put it on your foot. Befiv, you held it in your mouth, if it's not a normal thing to hold in your mouth. Or Marpeika, you held it in your elbow like this. Ba'ozno, you put it on your ear. Or Besairi, you stuck it in your hair. Or Befundasai, if you stuck it into your belt, in like a pouch, but like not in the typical way, as we'll see. So how is that possible? How is that not the typical way? It's like a pouch, but it's upside down. And somehow you manage to like keep it tight enough while it's upside down. If it's the right side up, that's what a pouch is for. But it was upside down, so it wouldn't naturally hold things, but it's tight enough so it holds it, so it's definitely unusual. Or bein pundose lechaluki, between his pouch and his clothing. It's not a normal place to put it. Ubisvas chaluki, you have like a cuff, and he put into the cuff. Biminoli, in your shoe, bisandoli, in your sandal. Potter, your potter shalei hoitzi kederech hamitzi. Whenever you did a malach in an unusual way, you are potter. Fine. Amar Rabbi Lazar. Says the Gemara. Hamoitzi masei l'mayla me'asor tefachim chayiv. We'll see soon that the halacha is that above 10 tefachim in Rishus Rabim is a mokim p'tur. So you might think, if I'm holding an object, and the object is higher than the ground 10 tefachim, I'm fine. Because the object is in a mokim p'tur? No. Since you're standing on the ground, no matter how high the object is, you're chayiv. How come? Shekin masa b'nei kahos. So what's the connection to our Mishnah? No connection whatsoever to the idea of higher than 10 tefachim. The fact that our Mishnah says that even things that don't fit to the regular rules, if we look in the Mishkan, we see that it happened that way, then is chayiv. From that we learn that also over here, although the regular rules would say, hey, it's a mokim p'tur, but in the Mishkan it was, and therefore he's chayiv. Okay, now how do we know? Maybe who says that they held the shulchan, the menorah, the mizbeach so high? Maybe they held it low, that the bottom of it was within 10 tefachim, and therefore they're chai. How do we know that they lifted the bottom of the object higher than 10 tefachim? Says the Gemara, the Chsiv, ala mishkav, ala mizbeach saviv. It says that the curtain in front of the door was, and the walls around the courtyard were covering, were protecting, were surrounding the Mishkan and the Mizbeach. So the Torah puts the Mishkan and the Mizbeach together. Makish Mizbeach le Mishkan. It compares the Mizbeach to the Mishkan. Ma Mishkan Eser Amis, Af Mizbeach Eser Amis. In the Psukim it says that the Mizbeach was 3 Amis. But from the comparison to the Mishkan, we learned that the Mishkan itself, the walls of the Mishkan were 10 Amis high. The Mizbeach was also 10 Amis high. So why does it say 3 Amis? The top part, from the Soiviv, from there was something surrounding the walls of the Mizbeach. The higher part was 3 Tvachim. Umishkan Gufi Min Olam. How do we know that the Mishkan itself was 10 Tvachim? The Chsev is a clear pasuk. Eser Amis Eirech HaKodesh. Fine. That the beams were 10 Amis high, 10 Amis long, so if they put them standing up, obviously they were 10 Amis high. So the Mishkan was 10 Amis high. Fine. So what? Uchsiv, it says on a pasuk, Vayifres es oil ala Mishkan. Moshe spread the coverings on the Mishkan. Now, it doesn't say that he was using a ladder. And it sounds like, he was the one that was able to do it. So, V'amar Rav, Moshe Rabbeinu Persi. Moshe Rabbeinu was able to spread it out because that was his height. He was 10 amas high. That's 5 meters high. A drop less. So he was able to spread the covering on the top of the Mishkan. Now, says the Gemara, says Rabbi Lazar, Mikan atalamed Goyvan Shalavi in Neser Amis. Moshe most probably wasn't unique. He was a Levi. It must have been the height of the Levium, the typical height of the Levium, 5 meters. Says the Gemara, so what? Ugemiri, we have learned like this. The whole tuna, any load, the midli b'moitis, the one carries with beams. The beams are holding the load, and he's putting the beams on his shoulder. Till somil third of the height of the load is above his shoulders. Utrei till simil sachas, and 2/3 are below his shoulders. Okay, so now the Levium are 10 amas, obviously including their head. Fine. And then they have, let's say, the Mizbeach, which is 10 amas high, on their shoulders. So 1/3 of it, that's 3 amas, 0.33, whatever, that's above their shoulders. And then 6 amas, 0.66, whatever, is below the shoulders. So you have 6 amas below the shoulders. Each amma is 6 tfachim. So it's higher than the ground, a bit less than 3 amas, because the 3 amas, which is a bit less than a 3 amas and a bit, because the 3 amas is above the shoulders, above the head. Fine. But then it's still way more than 10 tfachim above the ground. So we see that even if he carries something 10 tfachim above the ground, you're still chayiv, it's still considered carrying. So again, Gemiri, we learned to call tuna any load, the midli v'moides that you carry with beams. Til sumil el, 1/3 of it is on top of your shoulders. A trei til sumil tachas, 2/3 are below the shoulders. Ishtakach, so the conclusion will be that the midli tuva was much higher than the ground than 10 tfach. Now you may argue with that, and you may say no, as we'll see soon. Maybe only Moshe was 10 amas high, not the rest of the Levium. So I have another raya. V'ibay seim mi'orin. Damar mar orin tisha v'kaperis tefach. Darin was totally 10 tfachim high, including the kaperis. Harekan yud ukimiri, and we know the cold tuna, any load, the midli b'moitis that you carry on beams, on sticks, Til a third of it is above your shoulders. Trei til similar, 2/3 below. Ishtakech, the conclusion will be the Lamaila Miyud have a koi. Definitely, the since we're only totally 10 tvachim, no matter how high they are, it's definitely going to be higher than the ground, more than 10 tvachim. And and therefore we see that if you carry things higher than 10 tvachim from the ground, you're still chayiv, because you're on the ground, you're still chayiv. Says the Gemara, Moshe, why was he not happy with the first limud that we learned from Moshe? Says the Gemara, Dilma Moshe Shani, Moshe could be different. The Amar Mar we have learned, Ein Shechina Shoira, the Shechina could only rest al Chacham Giber Vashir Bal Koima. To have Shechina resting on someone, he has to be wise, he has to be mighty, wise with Torah, mighty in his Yitzhar Hara, Asher, he has to have riches. They shouldn't be running out thinking about money. He has to have that all comfortably. About koima, he has to be high. So in Chidus we mainly explained that it means high with his midos, with his 10 koichis, but that also expressed itself physically. That is, therefore, his size was 10 amis. So that's only Moshe because he had the Shekhinah resting on him, but the rest of the Levim not necessarily. So we had to find another source that even if the Levim were shorter than 10 amis, we could still prove that the load was 10 tvachim above the ground. Fine? Okay. Now that we're discussing back to our Mishnah, really, where and which type of how the way you carry an object, where are you putting it, if you're chayiv or potter. So the shoulders are chayiv, although it's untypical, but it was in the Mishkan. What about on your head? So there are places where they carry loads on their head. So they had it in Bavel as well. If you carry a load on your head on Shabbos, and Hutzel they do that. If one place they do that, it's normal. Says the whole world has to follow Hutzel. Hutzel does it. Most people don't do it, so it's not normal. Okay, we didn't record it right. We have to whatever, you have to edit it. It wasn't recorded right. One of those people in that town, if they took something on their head, because people in this town do that, so it's normal. If it's normal, it's chayiv. So you want to know. It's one town in the whole world. Most civilized places don't do that. We should nullify his behavior for other people's behavior. You're right, we have to edit it like this. If anyone carries a load on his head, they're potter. And even if he's from Hutzel, if you want to argue and you'll say Anchi Hutzel, in Hutzel they do that? No, it's a kolodom, you don't follow Hutzel, we follow the majority of the world, which the majority of the world does not carry it on the head. Okay. So to summarize, we spoke about when it removes a box. So Chizkiah and Abaye say, according to the conclusion of the Gemara, that if a complete object was removed from Rishus HaYachid, although the box with other objects were still in Rishus HaYachid, is chayiv because the complete object was removed. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi say no, a keli is one entity, and if part of it was still inside, then he's potter. Then we have an opposite machlokes between Abaye and Rav about a hand. If one sticks his hand out with an object from Rishus HaYachid, so if he's lifting it in the air, then obviously he's potter, as the Mishnah clearly says, because the hand is not resting. The object isn't resting. The hand alone is not a resting place, since the body is still inside. It's not a settled place. However, if he put his hand down close to the ground within 3 tefachim, so it's considered on the ground, it's considered resting, but you could pull it in. Says Abaye, since you could pull it in, you're potter. Rabbi says, no, it's outside, you're chayiv. Then we spoke about how you're carrying an object. That only if you carry your object in a normal form, then you're chayiv. What's normal? Right hand, left hand, under your arm, it's all normal. On your shoulders is not normal, but in the Mishkan they did it. Since in the Mishkan they did it, that's the way the Bnei Kohath used to carry it. Therefore, you're chayiv. Then other abnormal forms on the back of your hand, on your foot, in your elbow, an upside down pouch between your pouch and your clothing, in your cuff, in your shoe. Since it's not a normal way of removing something, you're pot. Now, since we learned out of Bnei Kohath, the Gemara mentions a different thing we learned out of Bnei Kohath. That although higher than 10 tefachim is considered a mokim b'tur regarding if you throw something in Rosh Hashanah, but if you're walking with something higher than 10 tefachim, you're still chayiv. Why? Because you fit it on the ground. But where do we know that from? From Bnei Kohath. Bnei Kohath have carried objects that the bottom was higher than 10 tefachim from the ground. Where do we see that? So we thought to prove it from the Mizbeach, which was 10 amas high, but a third was above their shoulders. That's the rule. We say that any object, a third is above the shoulders and 2/3 are below. And the Leviim, we thought to learn from Moshe that just like Moshe was 10 amas high, and therefore he put the covering on the Mishkan, so too they were 10 amas high, and therefore they're so high that a third of the Mizbeach, which was above their shoulders, that's a third of 10 amas, and it's a third of their height as well, that was higher than the ground, a third of 10 amas, which is much more than 10 tefachim. Each amas is 6 tefachim. So therefore, therefore we see that although they carried it higher than 10 tefachim, they're still chayiv. But then the Gemara says, lav davke all Levim were 10 amas, only Moshe. Moshe had to have the Shechina resting on him, he had to be a balkoim, he had to have a proper height. So therefore we prove from the Aron was totally 10 tefachim high, and they carried it on their shoulders. So 3.33 whatever was above their shoulders, and 6.66 was below their shoulders, and that was much higher than 10 tefachim from the ground, and they're still high. Then there was something which Rav said the name of Rabbi about a minig of a specific place, which is unusual for other places. So first, the recording was that Rav said the name of Rabbi that, let's say hutzel they carry on their head, it's normal for them. So anybody who does it in the whole world is chayv. It can't be just one town. Okay, so if they do it, they're chayv. Can't either be. Everyone else doesn't do it. So the conclusion was that since most of the world does not carry it on their head, and even people of that place are also potter. Slucha.